So we'll call meeting to order. And do we have anyone for public comment? So one of the first actions we'll take, since we don't have a quorum, I'll have Karen Yearwood sit in pro temp for the committee, so we have a quorum. And we do have Erin virtually, so the records will reflect that. Karen, I'm not sure if you were able to review the minutes from the last meeting. Erin, are you good with the minutes?
I am.
All right, so we will move to the consideration of accounts and 4.1, the resolution authorizing issuance of individual procurement cards
Right.
from
So,
Montreal.
I know it's an interesting thing. So, as you all know, we just reviewed the policy, the purchasing policy, right? And we wanted to get that in line with the policy committee and finance committee before discussing this idea of what's called P cards or purchasing cards. So let me just chat a little bit about our current system, and then we can talk about why we want to move to this system. So our current system is we have very few, there's 3 total in the district credit cards that are actually real credit cards. Just there's a limit to them overall, but not related to a purchase order, right? So behind the scenes, we create a purchase order, but if somebody got their hands on it, you could definitely charge to them, right? And you'd have to go through sort of the fraud protection piece, or, the contesting of any kind of charges. We have a system in place where we cut checks for people. So if they travel, they can take a check with them. And we know the amount, and it's usually to that business. And I will tell you, post-COVID, it is getting harder and harder to take a check to a location like, right, a hotel or a restaurant or whatever it might be as you travel, whether with students or with as bus drivers and you're taking kids places. Or you can get a purchase order created for yourself. You go, you shop with approval, you come back, you submit your receipts, those have to be scrutinized. Then you get a check to you to reimburse you, but I hope you didn't charge tax, because that's not right. So all of these things. So imagine that a P card, a purchase card, right, is like, you know how you can essentially get those like a Visa card, or that has a limit to it, right? P cards are actually behind the scenes in the software. They would have the information that our purchasing policy would require to be able to make a purchase. So number one, you have to have a purchase order established to the vendor, or to the whatever that vendor, approved vendor may be. It could actually be a few vendors. So for example, like the pre-K program said, I'd like to go and purchase supplies, and we knew that we overspent somewhere, we could not put that vendor, but we could say, you could go to these 4 places and purchase supplies, and the amount of money is set. And that's the amount that you would be allowed to spend on that P card. The receipt system is a lot easier, because actually a lot of times then you can just upload that, it's right there, it can be audited very quickly and easily. And also to all these card-based transactions, you can shut that card down. If it's lost, if it's taken, if you don't know where it is, it can be shut down, and then it can be reissued. The best part about a lot of this is that it can travel with people, right? So actually you could take that card, and if there's no PO with it, and it's not like authorized for the amount of money, you can't use it. It's just a piece of plastic that sits in your wallet. So lots of school districts are utilizing this. And the reason why you see it's from other places is that the banks that are supporting this, the software tools, right, that's where they're located. So we've been working with a business official through New York State ASBO, which is the Association for School Business Officials. They're the ones who are sort of rolling this out across the state. This is not new. We are just a little bit later to this game. We feel that the way that we would want to respond to student needs and staff needs, right? Specifically bus drivers, pre-K, things like that, that this would be a really great opportunity for us to pilot in a few departments, see how it goes, get, like, report back to you if this is successful, what tweaks needed to be made so that it could be successful, and then eventually roll this out across Ithaca City School District. So Sydney Wade was the one who put this together. Connie Talmadge in our office will be running that. And she will be working through sort of all the nuts and bolts of it. And we just wanted to also give a summary that's there in the consideration of accounts for people to read. But I think that I covered most of it. So again, we're following all the same rules. This, just like a Chromebook, is a tool for us, right? It's a tool in terms of following the purchasing rules and requirements with just a little bit of a better ease than a check or the 3 credit cards that exist.
Yeah, I think it's time to get out of the paper check.
We would like to do that.
All right, cool.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Few IPI grants, but then we've got some special aid funds. And then 21st Learning monies being dispersed. 21st century, wow, that would be dangerous. Do we want to speak to any of that just for the public's sake? And
These are just the grants
Grants.
that. You hear me?
Don't
These are
get
just
yelled
the
at.
grants that we receive from the state. The Head Start is a local grant.
Yep.
And then the 21st Century Community Learning is a state grant. And it's just receiving the funds and actually allocating them into the budget. So we usually get those a little bit after the budget starts, and then we appropriate all the money into all of our grant.
And the last one, we're just transferring funds from the approval of transfer funds. Any questions? All right, moving right along. Technology presentation. No? Zach, you are up.
Thanks for joining us, Zach. So keeping in our series, our budget developer series, Zach Lind and then Jennifer Gondek. So we're really excited to have you both.
All right, so. All right. Hi, everyone. So we've done this every year for the last, I think, 6 or 7 years. But it's good to see you all in person. For some of you, I haven't had the chance, so, hi. Good to see you all. So a couple things to know off the top, with our technology budget, most of our budget sort of runs through BOCES, and that's sort of where the bulk of our monies are spent. But it really comes down into a couple of different areas and a couple of things to know. Every year we have to spend down our sort of mandatory, per student amount of money, sort of using in-house ICSD monies, and we have to do that for software, and we have to do that for instructional hardware. But after that, any further money we spend in technology, we try to maximize using usually either leasing or just direct purchasing programs through OCM, the CineRic sort of BOCES consortium. In terms of the actual ICSD cost, the biggest thing for us is staffing. Some of you may know that over the last several years, we've moved pretty much all of our staffing from being sort of BOCES-based folks that they sort of came in bits and pieces, partials, and we moved to a consolidated staffing model where all of our employees are ICSD employees. There's been a lot of really great benefits of that. These employees now are part of our unions that most of these folks are now local folks working in our community, and we've been able to sort of do joint trainings, sort of work with them on district goals and initiatives, and it's been sort of a great shift that we've made. Right now we have one partial last piece of staff through BOCES, but next year we're going to move away from that as well. In terms of our budget, we're coming in at right around a little over 5 million, which I think is about flat year over year. That's sort of the straight breakdown of sort of what our buckets are. So we have our staffing, we have our in-house sort of purchasing, and then we have our monies that we spend through different BOCES. Any questions on this here or the things we've went over so far? I know I've amended, Chris, we talked, I don't know if these numbers reflected it. I fixed the numbers. There was some math errors in there.
I have to thank Karen.
Yeah. Oh, Karen, thank you. So I think this is right, but I know I amended that before, so I can make sure that proper numbers are in there and amended.
And when, if you may, what goes into purchases? We know what goes into staff, but just for the.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump ahead a slide, because I think that are two, just to show you. So things that we tend to purchase, there's like the Chromebooks, right? Sort of almost every piece of equipment, technological equipment in this room gets purchased. Usually it's through BOCES. So sort of, it's what keeps the backbone infrastructure, everything from the cables that we're plugging in with to the screens. But then there's also sort of a lot of like background purchases, like IT infrastructure, the cabling, for example, that if you see the camera up there, there's a black cable like that run that goes back to a closet somewhere, right? So cabling is, you all that have worked with this facilities know it can be an onerous expense. So cabling, infrastructure, our access points, you see the ceilings here, we have one there, which is how we get our Wi-Fi. All of that then has to be networked back. And then between all of our buildings, we have fibers that run between our buildings and district office in our Hancock Street facility, and all of that is included there. We're also, as part of the purchasing, we have lease agreements with that are set up through our BOCES, but like, I don't know if anyone knows that like at DeWitt, the internet went offline like 2 times in a couple of weeks. I don't know if you all heard about this a couple of weeks ago. I'm not trying to bring up bad news to anyone, but what had happened there is that we contract out with a company, and a squirrel had gotten into the conduit and flew through it twice in a couple of weeks, and so they ended up putting in like a giant metal conduit. But part of that is what we pay for is like a 4-hour service, so they have to be there within 4 hours to start working on it and fix it, because we know that the infrastructure for our IT is crucial to the success of our schools is staying safe and functioning. In terms of actual specific purchasing that we're doing a lot of, I wrote a term up there called E-rate. I don't know if you're all, the short version of E-rate is it's the primary way that schools can spend, sort of access federal funding to sort of build out that behind the scenes infrastructure. So everything that's sort of in the ceilings and the walls, you get E-rate funding, and you get, every year we have to become E-rate compliant. What it has to do, we have to sort of pass some certain basic thresholds about how we provide service and what we do. And then we can apply for funding. For us, E-rate, we get, if we spend $900,000, we get about half that back in E-rate funding. So it's a great way to, for schools to invest in expensive infrastructure because it's subsidized. And a lot of the E-rate fund itself at the federal level actually comes through like a lot of telecommunications surcharges and that sort of thing. Other things that we are spending our money on 3D printers. I don't know if you all know this, but every single elementary library now has a 3D printer in it, which is really cool. When I first started this job, we had maybe one, actually Dan, I think he was up with you, and he's always fun. He asked me to fix it, and I didn't know how. It was a long time ago. Do you still have that? But now we have that everywhere, and it's a really great translation tool when we think about technology, translating a abstract theoretical 3D object into a physical thing. So it's a great way for students to test out sort of creating in a whole new medium that's probably, for even myself, it's something I don't quite have a handle on, but it's really cool. So we have those. That's been a big thing, along with our we have a computer science lending library now, where we can, we lend out kits and provide curriculum, and classrooms can sort of get little robot kits and, all sorts of great instructional materials. Another thing, that we work on is number 4 there. It's our security system upgrades. It's sort of the access controls as we swipe into buildings and, the cameras that sort of provide security around our district. There's a state fund, I believe it's the SAFE, I get all the SAFE acronyms confused sometimes, Amanda, so you can help me out. It's the SAFE Act, right, that where we can get money back.
For hardening. Yep.
So we can spend about, up to $35,000 a year. If we put that in our budget. If we do, we then get that money back, when we spend it the following year. So that's another sort of lever that we're using. And so that's sort of like the different main pieces of purchasing that we do. The last thing, which is the first thing up there, is the Chromebooks. That's sort of our bread and butter to our students. We purchase about 1,600 to 2,400 Chromebooks a year. They're all sort of different grade levels that are on different rotations and schedules. Really fun things to know is as last year, we had about a $50,000+ contract with BOCES to fix our devices. This year, we don't have that anymore. And our students, we have a student-led help desk. Gio and Zach back here help run that. And our students and our team work together collaboratively to fix devices. So it's been a really great success, and all of our devices get fixed in-house now. So that's sort of a fun element where we built sort of an identified talent in our school systems and work collaboratively with our students to fix our devices and brought costs down at the same time.
Zach, what's the life of a Chromebook?
Well, there's the day in a life of a Chromebook, but I don't think that's what you're asking. So our Chromebooks get anywhere between 3 and 5 years. When we get them, sort of Google has like an end of life projection date that they'll usually bump back like 3 to 6 to 12 months, depending on how the model works. We generally get about, we plan on 3 or so years per Chromebook. Each Chromebook costs, just in terms of hardware, costs about, $200 plus or minus $25, $200 a piece. And so what we've never sort of self-insure these Chromebooks, because we find that we had a sort of attrition rate of between 10 and 15%, depending on the school year. One thing to know is over the years, the Chromebooks have gotten better and our students have gotten a lot better at taking care of them. So we don't see the same sort of losses that we saw when we first started. But we're generally going to get 3 to 5 years out of each device, and then we'll rotate them through. Go find the students, swap them out.
So you're saying next time I break a screen, Gio can fix it?
Perhaps. Yeah, I mean, that's that Apple devices are a whole nother thing that we'd love to get into. And yeah, that's again, but part of that I want to be really clear about. It's really intentional. It's not like we want to fix these just because we want to like save money and fix them. It's developing folks in our school system and on our team that have skills, and they're sort of upskilling. And we're finding students that can like do this work, and they can see like, oh, this could be a path for me, this could be a career for me, and giving them sort of a peek into sort of what working in technology looks like. So I just want to be clear that it's not just a move to sort of save time and money, but it's actually a move to sort of educate and create connections with our students. Yeah.
I don't think you need to apologize for saving money.
Oh, I know, but yeah, I appreciate that. I think, but I also think it's there's deeper thought to it. So yes, thank you.
So for current students, are they receiving any credit bearing to participate as
Yeah.
help desk and all?
Yeah, so we have a work-based credit program where the students, every 50 hours, they get like a half credit. And we keep track of it in a spreadsheet, and they can get credits towards graduation. So that's been going pretty well.
And you'd mentioned about the Linden Library and the kits. Is it a curriculum kit? And do we also have like audiobooks that go through the library?
Okay, yeah, so This is it's specifically a computer science lending library, so within that, we have, just computer science, sort of like widgets, I would say, lots of little devices where students can, everything from like, develop a sensor that can track temperature, right? And they can program a little, program it to keep track of that data and then look at that data and say, now this is the temperature over time, right? And then we do have curriculum that we'll send to folks and help them out with that. In terms of like a lending library, that would be more in our sort of our library view. And we do actually have a pretty robust, our ebooks. And I don't know, for folks that have children in the district like I do, my children are constantly on Sora using the lending libraries that are this sort of digital lending libraries that each of our schools provide. They're constantly either listening to audiobooks, sort of any type of literature that's there as well.
Thank you.
The last piece is sort of related to all of this, but it's just a, I'll go back to staffing, but one of the things to know is that we purchase sort of strategically over time. So I said there's two ways to purchase. We can either get leases where we can say we had a catastrophic failure of like a main network closet, and it's going to cost $500,000 to replace. We don't necessarily have to come up with that money in a one-off setting. We can work with our BOCES to create a lease that can be 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we can spread those costs over time. So what we try to do in terms of strategic purchasing is, buy large ticket items and spread those costs out over time so that we never get hit by like giant spikes that would happen in 1 year. So this is just a sort of a summary of the existing leases that we have out there, what was purchased, and then sort of, next year we anticipate doing about another $1 million worth of leasing. Also, we have a lease for the network fiber, meaning the fibers that connect all our buildings. And then we also do leasing of printing services. And right now we're currently negotiating with sort of 3 different vendors about printing services for our next 48-month cycle. So I just wanted to show everyone sort of this sort of spreadsheet that summarizes it all, but it's pretty pivotal to us because it does represent about $2+ million a year in expenses. No questions on that. I'll just jump to the last piece, which is staffing. I mentioned before that most of our folks are now ICSD based. So just a quick summary, we have two folks who are pushing into to support computer science. They're sort of posted teachers on special assignment to support computer science and technology integration services. We have an administrative applications specialist, which is sort of some of you may know, Jen Southworth. She handles a lot of our sort of administrative tasks, but also some of the application of those tools. We also have network specialists. We're looking at having 2 system administrators next year. And so you sort of see we have all these different positions. Then we have our microcomputer specialists, and microcomputer technicians, which are our first tier. One thing to know about this is we've actually rewritten the for both of these microcomputer and specialist and technician titles, we've rewritten the civil service requirements. Previously, civil service requirements for these jobs were pretty, had a lot of gatekeeping in it, specifically saying you had to have like a computer science degree to do this work. So we've rewritten them to add more pathways and allow more folks to come join our department without having like a full-on computer science degree. What we found is folks that have computer science degrees, in some cases, it's just a much tighter job market trying to recruit those folks. So now we're trying to find more pathways there. So that's sort of our the summary of our staffing setup. That concludes sort of all the main pieces that I want to show you all today. Happy to take any other questions that you might have.
You mentioned that the total budget is pretty much level this year. Are there areas where you can point out that there have been increases beyond the 5 million-ish baseline?
Yeah, so one of the things we've seen is a lot of our vendor partners, you're seeing, you know, probably 3 to 8% increase in costs. Just for like renewals of services, so like whether it's you know, like a supplementary curricular tool, or it could be like one of our learning management platforms or the Google services that we use. So we see some of those costs picking up a little bit, but nothing that we haven't been, again, because we sort of budget and plan out over years, it's nothing that's hugely significant. Like we haven't seen any price spikes more than, you know, several $1,000s in a specific type of unit. One thing we have seen is like lithium, which is, you know, in a lot of the batteries everywhere. That's hard to get, and then we're seeing issues with chips that go into our devices. So we've seen a spike in costs in different types of devices that need those materials. And so for that, we've either tried to find other things to buy or just sort of juggle our budget a little bit and spread, you know, we'll buy these now. Those have come down a little bit in cost over the last year or so, but, you know, our standard teacher devices, when I first started, you know, were probably $400 less than they are now. So over, you know, you've seen $80 or $90 a year increase in your standard device that we give to teachers over, you know, probably every year.
And the 18 department staff members, that's going to remain level for this coming year?
Yeah, that's what we anticipate.
Thank you.
I think, oh, sorry, but also coming year over year, you worked hard to get to the 18-member staff position because we didn't always have that.
Yeah, I mean, so for a long time, a lot of those folks were with BOCES, and it was like you get like a package of folks coming in and out of your district. So it was kind of, it was hard to even define who was actually working with us.
I have a question about I think the stopgap measures that we used during COVID to reach some of the folks out in our country areas who didn't have Wi-Fi was buses, right? We outfitted some of our buses to basically turn them into hotspots on wheels.
So, maybe we did that once or twice. Mostly we would send out hotspots just themselves to folks.
Okay,
And they would just have a hotspot in their home during that time.
so the question is, are we still doing that, or have we figured out another solution now that COVID has ended? Or is it not as critical because COVID has ended?
I'd say it's a combination of all three of those. So right now, in terms of our population that doesn't have high-speed internet, we have two issues. One, we have sort of this last mile of service issue we see in really rural areas. Particularly, we see that in Caroline, we see that in Danby, we see that in parts of Enfield, where, you know, literally just getting a cable into that last mile is cost prohibitive. So in those cases, sometimes the hotspots can work, but we also have issues of just access, even in sort of our city area where, you know, there's a cost issue. So we've tried to drive folks to free and low cost programs that exist. Some of those have phased out. And then in some instances, we have to provide hotspots for students that are in need. And we are also seeing some of the municipalities in our area trying to figure out creative ways to provide internet to their residents. There's also some new technologies like Starlink, for example, which provides low orbit internet from satellites that does provide high speed in really rural areas. That is pretty cost prohibitive in terms of the setup costs and monthly costs, but it does provide that as well. So there's been technological advancements. There's been you know, some shifts in how our municipalities are trying to fill these gaps in. And then there's us, still just providing support as needed where we, you know, where it's really necessary.
But we're pretty sure we got most of the kids covered.
I think so. I mean, it's about, I think 8 to 10% last time we like really looked at it of folks that didn't have access. And I know when during the height of COVID, when we were polling and asking, surveying families, I think we had about 100 families that indicated a need out of, I think, 3,000 or so in our district at that time. And so we had some good ideas and numbers in actual specific addresses to work from and be like, all right, here. But I would also be remiss if I were to not acknowledge that there's still needs in our world to provide low-cost internet to everyone. I mean, if you're asking me, I think it should be treated more like we treat electricity, and it shouldn't be a privilege, it should almost be like a right of access. But so there's still holes there, and I had talked to folks in our sort of county and local municipalities, but there's work to be done. So there's definitely still some problems out there.
Do we know the numbers for Enfield, like to make sure that because over the years, that's been one area that didn't have the access that is needed. And I know that that elementary school, they were really looking to ensure it's a community school. And so that families could even come near the school to have access.
Yeah, so I don't have this, we could pull up our spreadsheet and tell you, there's definitely a few roads in Enfield, probably like, I'd be guessing 4 or 5 specific roads that, coverage stopped at a certain area. And then one of the other things that also exists is like, if there's no cell phone coverage, that's a whole nother problem. So that also exists in parts of Enfield, Newfield, and Caroline where you have neither. But if you do come to any of our schools, there is a Wi-Fi that you can join as well. So we definitely have had that up.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. And as always, if any other questions come up, please let me know.
All right. So we'll switch to special education presentation. Hello, Jen. How are you?
Hey, Janet. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much for letting me present tonight. I'm going to share some numbers with you as far as our population and who we serve and what that looks like in the district. And stop me at any time if you have questions. So I wanted to start out by just taking a look at our continuum of special education. So this reflects our New York State continuum. You can see we provide consultant services that might be direct or indirect to students. We have resource rooms, special class, and out-of-district placements for students with special needs. We also have integrated co-teaching, which is the only optional service on the New York State continuum, and we provide that and offer that K-8. So in our elementary and middle schools, we have fully integrated co-taught classrooms in addition to other things on the continuum. There we go. So just some of the numbers, we're taking a look first at the classification rate of students with disabilities. So these are students that are receiving special education services. They are classified with an IEP in the district. And you can see we have a small increase over last year. We were at 17.9%. We're at 18.1%, which is right hovering around the state average of 18%. We have a national average of 14% of students with disabilities. New York State has 18 overall. The big 5 schools have a little bit higher classification rate, hovering in the lower 20s. We also have had a slight increase in students that are eligible for 504 plans. So these are students with disabilities that don't meet the criteria for an IEP, where there is one of the 13 educational classifications. So you can see I have a 5-year perspective. We've had some increases, and you can take a look at the those numbers have increased, particularly past COVID, where we've seen some increases for students that in particular around attentional and anxiety and depression. So of that number, 33% of the students have some sort of either formal diagnosis around ADD or ADHD or attentional issues, and 33% have anxiety or depression. And then our next highest classification areas are medical needs, which vary quite widely, or physical impairments or motor needs.
So Jennifer, you saying ADHD is not a IEP classification, but a 504 classification?
So it can be either. So under the, let me go back here. So under the IEP, the students that have ADHD could be classified with other health impairment, which is a broad category that is looking at students that have difficulty sustaining stamina and focus and attention. We have some students where that really impacts them in the classroom and they're not able to access their gen ed curriculum through that and will need accommodations and specially designed instruction. We have another population of students that may have that classification, that diagnosis, I should say, perhaps from a doctor, but we don't see the impact in the classroom to the degree where they might need specially designed instruction and heavy assistive technology or accommodations. They might need a couple of accommodations to help support that. They would still be eligible for a 504 plan. Taking a look at those top 5 disability classifications. So these are for students that receive the IEP through our Committee on Special Education. These have remained steady over the years in Ithaca. You'll see a slight increase, and to your point, Eldred, we have in the past year gone up 2% in the other health impairment. We're seeing some increases again with sustaining focus and stamina and attention. And the others, you'll see a decrease in the learning disability, particularly because over the past couple of years, it's been quite difficult to determine if student truly has a learning disability, especially if they've been absent so much due to medical, COVID, attendance. There's been a lot of impact in looking at those different classifications. To meet the needs, we are looking at some staffing increases. You can see the 3-year projection that we've had. We have increased our special education teachers. We originally increased to make sure we had co-taught math classes at the middle school level. We talked a little bit about that last year. As far as the projection for this year, we have 80.2 positions for special education teachers across the district. We'll look at a slight increase in speech, OT, and social workers. I did put a little star next to the ESPs, which are teacher aides and teaching assistants, because we are still currently hiring for those positions. And we also have had unique, I think pretty unique situation where we are also providing students that need one-to-one aides to BOCES and to some of our out-of-district placements like New Roots or Montessori, where we haven't had to do that in the past. So those are included in the numbers here.
Can you explain on that other slide, Jen, can you explain the need for the increase in social workers from, well, let's go back to 14 to 20.5?
Yeah, so we've had an increase at the middle school level. Last year, we increased to have 2 social workers at each middle school and an additional social worker at the high school. We've also had increased needs for counseling at our private schools and New Roots. So we do also provide a social worker there. He's not there full time, he splits between, but that was an additional increase that used to be contracted out. So an agency used to do that, or a private contract. So we added that as well. And so that number is included in that social worker.
Without violating any rules, what are the basic underlying reasons for this increased need? What are we seeing in little people?
Yeah, so we're seeing, I think it goes back to where we're seeing those increased needs around attention and focus, and also the anxiety and depression.
When we're looking at what students need to be successful, school-based social workers are, they're providing direct counseling, school-based counseling, but they're also providing support to consultation to teams, providing assessments, helping, both our psychologists and social workers will do functional behavior assessments, develop behavior plans, collaborate with families, to figure out why students aren't able to attend school or having anxiety around school. So as we see those needs go up, we're seeing an increased need, not just for the specific IEP-based counseling, but also for just general, I would say RTI type of social emotional needs.
So if I understand it correctly, we may never be able to tie that increase directly to an outcome in grades or test scores. It's a much broader array of assessments written loosely, right?
Well, I think the ultimate goal of that kids are in class and they're learning and being successful, which could be tied to grades in the ultimate or test grades in the ultimate, if you were to draw that line. I think right now where we have a lot of kids that need additional support around feeling comfortable, safe, heard, and loved in class. And so I feel like that piece, just sometimes for some kids, step one is just getting to school. And then step two is getting them comfortable in class and participating and engaged. I'll also say we're really working with our classroom teachers. So a lot of our social workers push in and do tier 1 RTI lessons. So I've been able to go in and observe, like Paul Rudy is one of our social workers at Caroline. He goes in to morning meeting once a week in all the 4th grade classrooms and talks with them about setting goals and the classroom community. And they use a lot of the aspects of ruler, which we'll talk about on a later slide. Yeah.
I'm going to start to register objections now that I know you know are coming because we've spoken about this. Despite the relatively level number of special education or services to people who have disabilities in this district and an actual decrease in the number of students overall in the district, there has been a huge increase in all of these areas since two years ago. And I'm going to speak as a school psychologist because I am a school psychologist. And I'll note that for anyone who's concerned that I'm attacking a particular area unfairly, this happens to be an area I know a lot about. I don't see it. I don't buy the argument. And that is because everything you say is what I know went on and went on years ago, not just 2 years ago, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I simply don't believe that the anxiety and depression in this school district is that much more significant than it was 2 years ago. And I've spoken with former colleagues. I speak with parents all the time, and I simply can't support additional increases this year. If I'd been here last year, I would have made the same objection. I think we have more than enough staff to meet the needs in our buildings, and I will use psychologists as an example. This increase that's being requested of a 1.0 FTE for the coming school year represents an increase in psychologist time at our smallest school. It would be a full-time psychologist at our smallest school with 139 students. So that's 139 students per school psychologist. The National Association of School Psychologists recommends one school psychologist for 500 students. So we would be providing 3 times as much FTE of school psychological services for those students as our own National Association recommends. And I assure you, our own National Association is not conservative. We like to see jobs for school psychologists. However, I think Eldred's point, if I might, of the whether there's a direct relationship between achievement or even emotional well-being, it simply can't be correlated to additional school psychologists and social workers. It makes some intuitive sense to all of us, but in reality, whenever that's measured in all kinds of ways, it simply doesn't show up. And I cannot, in good conscience, argue that essentially throwing more money at this when the problem hasn't been well defined and can't be measured is appropriate. That's all I'm going to say for now.
All right, Jill, given your expertise, then I think you need to help us as a board grapple with these numbers that we see. I mean, I see it in the line at Chris's store. I see all these magazines staring at me saying increases in suicide rates, increases in anxiety, increases in X, Y, and Z are paralyzing our students. I've talked to the psychologists at the high school pretty in depth over the last couple of years, and they've told me about things I never heard of. What is it called? School resistance, where kids are just saying, I'm not coming. Right? Self-injury short of suicide. That's the phrase I'd never heard of until 5 or 6 years ago. So in your professional capacity, I'm going to appeal to you to help us as a board square that, because the more educated we are, the more we can engage in these conversations with our staff. Right now, I feel like I'm not capable because I know what I'm seeing and hearing, especially about, I mean, in the last couple of years, maybe before you joined the board, we lost some real treasures in this community, right? Young people who did take their own life. And so I would pay 70 people if we could prevent one. So moving forward, just keep educating us about how we square that difference in what we're hearing and reading and seeing.
I want to piggyback on it.
Sure.
What Eldred's saying in regards to what's being told to us as far as this is a need, and we've been hearing this for at least 5 years that I can remember. And you're the expert in what I've heard, and what's been presented to us is that we were woefully lacking in supporting classroom experiences with what we had prior to this.
Begin and
We might have to do a development session.
yeah, I mean, I have a 30-year timeline on this. I started in this district in '84. And we had the same things going on then. Now, can I say that it was at the same level? No, but somebody can, and the somebody who can are not the newspaper headlines or the magazine articles, because there's a major case of awfulization, what social workers call awfulization. That's what sells. That's what sells. And there's absolutely no evidence to show that an additional 0.5 FTE of a school psychologist at the elementary level, when our own association says we've got plenty of coverage there. I haven't seen anything that would indicate to me that whatever would happen with that additional FTE at our smallest school would in any way impact the things we're all concerned about. Because I agree, if I could have a guarantee, I would say, my goodness, let's have 30 school psychologists. But there is none. And the reality is this district has operated very well for many years with approximately 10 school psychologists. Now, and furthermore, I would argue if they were going to add another FTE and we were going to be concerned about emotional difficulties, depression, anxiety, then the realistic thing to do would be to see where that's an issue and add the FTE there and make sure that that person's time is spent addressing those issues. You know, rather than this, here, have another half-time school psychologist, have another 3 social workers. It doesn't make sense. And Jen certainly is very familiar with what's going on currently, but I think there's been a major case of what I call mission creep here. And that's that we've gotten the sense that things are awful. And again, over 30 years, things are always awful. We've gotten the sense that things are awful, and what we need to do is add more people, spend more money. And I'm not sure, I know we don't have evidence that that's the case. And I could go on forever, but I won't. Thank you for, yeah.
Now we know what now we know where our learning, where our wonders are, using this language they are teaching us. Now we know where our wonderings are.
We'll talk later.
Can I ask a question for Jen, if y'all can hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. It's hard to hear on this end a little bit too, and I've got all my output stuff up. But anyway, for Jen, psychologists and social workers aside, my experience is that we do need the increase in special ed teachers and speech and occupational therapists. So Jill, I don't know your experience there, but I'm curious, Jen, about like, excuse me, with the co-teaching initiatives and all of that, but also additionally, some of the teachers that don't have special education certification serving as special education teachers. And I'm not sure if that came out as a question, but I'd just like to hear a little bit more about the need for these positions.
Yeah, let's start with special education teachers. So, can you hear me okay, Erin?
Erin's gone.
No, she's not on, her camera's off.
Okay, that's okay. So I got a little bit about the special education positions are tied to an increase in the integrated teaching model. So when you look at direct consultant teacher services, those are generally, they are a push-in service where a special education teacher would go into a classroom, work with an individual student or a group of students, and provide a short-term service. Usually that happens to be around 20 minutes, 30 minutes, push in, leave the class, go to another class, push in. Integrated co-teaching is a model where specially designed instruction and the primary academic instruction happen simultaneously. So if you think about a 4th grade math lesson, coming in and giving 20 or 30 minutes doesn't make sense because you can't do both of those things at the same time. So the teacher, the special education teacher should be present for the entirety of the lesson. When you look at the regulation, it'll say like the whole period, meaning at the middle school level, 42 minutes or whatever that might be. At the elementary level, it's however long that essential lesson is. So the math lesson, 60 minutes, they really should be present for the 60 minutes. They're providing between those two teachers, both the primary academic instruction and specially designed instruction at the same time. It's happening simultaneously so that kids are being able to participate in their gen ed instruction, but then also receive those accommodations and that specially designed instruction. So as we're looking at moving towards that model, which has been happening over the past few years, you can see that increase was happening at the middle school level, but also at the elementary level. So I think that that is one area where we can see the increase and the reason behind it being tied to providing a more inclusive model as we're trying to really provide the least restrictive environment for students. The speech and OT, I will say we've had, again, increases. We are seeing more kids coming in, and I will, it is my opinion that it is due to, especially our kindergarten, 1st grade students. They were in virtual pre-K in some cases. They did not hold pencils in their hands. So we've been trying to provide as much tier 1 support, but we also have students that have disabilities or have enough delays that they qualify for services. Same with speech and language. We had masks on for a long time. Our youngest students, we're seeing articulation, we're seeing phonological sound differences where they're not able to discriminate sounds. So we do see some of that impact on top of what we normally would have. And I will just say also, we have been contracting out, and you'll see this on a different slide, a lot of those services and I think every district around us has a speech opening right now. Therapists are hard to find, and I know that was the truth before me. We were trying to post early, make sure that we were getting the best candidates, but there just are not a lot of them out there. Erin, do you have any other questions?
No, thank you, Jen.
Okay, I'll keep going. I'm looking at the time. Any other questions?
Another observation, Jen, about the push-in services, about the co-teaching. And it's something I'm very much in favor of. And here comes the caution, and that is too often when I've observed it, it has been the same kids pulled aside in exactly the way they used to be pulled out. And my question is kind of philosophical, is like, how is someone supposed to pay attention to the classroom teacher giving a lesson for 40 minutes and attend to their special education teacher providing a modified, alternative, changed lesson in some way? Because it's pretty hard for any of us to pay attention to two different things going on. And although, again, philosophically, I agree with the idea that we want to have everyone we can in the classroom benefiting from that, all too often, I haven't seen it work that way.
That's a great question, Jill. I'll talk a little bit on the next slide, if you don't mind, because I did want to speak to that after the budget piece. Well, we have a few priorities, so I'll just keep going and come back to that. So this is the projected budget. I did want to just share that we've seen, again, increases in certain areas where we're projecting. So for instance, we always put 700,000 aside for tuition for students that might be attending residential settings. We have actually had a decrease in the number of students, but that have been at out-of-district placements or residential settings, but you sort of never know when a student might need that. So as kind of a safe harbor where we keep that in the budget. You'll see the contractual services from 22-23. There are two numbers there. I wanted to speak to the fact that we had originally budgeted when I presented last year for the 747,840. And then we talked afterwards and had reduced that number because we wanted to hire staff that were in districts. So we were contracting out OTs, speech and language providers, social work psychologists work, and trying to increase, paired with increasing the FTE, we would be decreasing those services. So we went back and so you can see the number that was projected last year and then below what the actual number was. And then this year, we're predicting our contractual services will be, I guess, less than projected last year, but slightly higher than what we had set aside in the last year. We'll have some of these places where contractual travel are tied to our numbers, again, supplies, where there's an allocation to OTs, speech and language providers, or special education teachers for supplies to provide accommodations or direct instruction to their students. Our equipment usually stays about the same in that around 35,000 is pretty accurate. It goes year to year, and it's really student specific. Sometimes we need a Hoyer lift, sometimes we need specialized chairs or equipment for students. And so we have a set side there. We usually don't spend all of it, and it really depends on what we need to replace or update. Go back, sorry. So this is our money that's coming in. So we have our IDA funding. We have the 611 and 619 federal grants. Historically, as you can see, they have been decreased since 2021. This is tied to the number of students with disabilities that we have in the district, even though it's going up. basically every district is getting a little bit less from the federal government each year. We also have our additional ERP IDA Part B funding. These are the numbers from last year. This rolls until September, so we're still been working to support providing additional funds to staff, and we've been able to. Some of this goes to salary, some of this for teachers that are paid out of our IDA grants, some for supplies, different equipment, things like that. Just takes a little bit of load off the budget for us. The other revenue streams we have are Medicaid, STAC, and tuition. So I'll just quickly go through these. Medicaid reimbursement, TC Pelletier in my office does all things Medicaid reimbursement. So she makes sure that we are able to submit. We get money back for the listed on the right, the therapies that are provided in school for students that are Medicaid eligible. There's a, I'll say, magical formula at the state that determines which students Medicaid eligible. It changes from month to month. She keeps track of that, bills Medicaid. So for the 21-22 school year, we hit our goal, which was the $500,000 mark. So that was total paid. We have about 500 pending. This year, where total paid is $356,000. Just for a reference, when I came last year, the number there was $144,000 with about 14 pending. So we're looking really positive. We have a whole quarter to go. So I think we're definitely going to make the over 500,000 mark. We're hoping we hit around 700,000. And then STAC is our students that have public access costs. So the number here is what we call high cost students. They are either in-district students that have one-to-one aides and receive multiple services, or are oftentimes BOCES students that go to receive their services at a program that goes over the threshold. So this year, the threshold is set at $54,816. And that goes up every year. Just for reference, about in 2018-19, the threshold was $44,000. So we don't start getting money back until the student's cost of education hits that threshold, and that is decided by the state. We do have a projected high cost aid increase. So we were about 500,000, over 500,000 last year. We're going to hopefully hit the 624,000 mark this year.
And this
Sure.
is the, so once a student's services hit the 54,000, are you saying that everything over that is 100% covered by STAC? No,
It's a percentage from the state. They determine it every year. And so based on the number of students we have, they're projecting, I can't remember the exact percentage. They don't actually, they're projecting these numbers in yellow. They aren't quite set yet. We'll get to know that usually in the summer, they'll go back. So we're always receiving money from the year behind. So they'll say, this is the final number. You'll receive some money from the previous school year.
what was the percentage of reimbursement or whatever you want to call it last year then, or the year before? Just
I can't remember off the top of my head. I can tell you the number was in 598,000, I believe, was the actual like flatline number, but I can't remember the percentage. I can get you that. Yeah. And then our priorities, I just want to quickly go through some of the exciting things that I'm excited about. So one of our partnerships that we have is with New York University, the program for inclusion and neurodiversity education, known as PINE. We started this with a pilot of a few schools that had what we had our students with the biggest population of students with autism or neurodiversity. And we found such success that we were able to increase this partnership. We have all 8 of our elementary schools, our PINE schools this year. What that means is they have an online program through NYU where they have coursework and modules. The first one is around understanding autism. It starts with an inclusive mindset. It talks about least restrictive environment, presuming competence. It's a very strength-based model. The second module is around supporting executive functioning, which not only supports our students with autism, but that number of students with attentional difficulties, often that goes hand in hand with executive function. So we've had really great feedback from our teams. And then they are also allowed to sign up for office hours. So Lauren Huff from Pine or her team have a set of really diverse office hours. They just click and a team will come and bring a problem of practice to them. What we're finding is a lot of them are using their team meeting times for students with IEPs, where they'll say, we're really struggling with student X in this issue, and they will coach them through a cycle where they help the team decide what's best, and they try it and then come back the next week and report back and try something new. So that's really exciting. I have this slide, which is the priorities around.
Jen,
Oh,
another
sorry.
question. It sounds like a neat program. What does it cost us?
So I think we have around $40,000 right now. We're using some of that ARP additional funding for supporting that. We've also run it through the COSER at BOCES, which means Elmira is also a Pine district. So we did a cross contract so that we could get money back from cost sharing through BOCES. The social emotional learning supports. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about this. Again, we've spoken about the additional staffing. Some of the other things that we're supporting are training and resources. You'll see the mood meter on the right, which is a tool that we've been using with the ruler program, where students kindergarten through high school are able to use this tool to identify kind of where they are feeling emotionally, high energy, pleasantness, and they tag the different quadrants to help put a visual to how they're feeling, and then use that tool. There are other tools. That was just the first one that I wanted to put up here and share. So we have training for staff right now. Some of our special education teachers, social workers, and psychologists are going through an online training that they brought to me. They really wanted to work on targeted goals for social emotional supports. And we also have some partnerships with agencies. So again, Pine's a great example. We've been working with Project Teach from Upstate Medical Center for students that have more significant mental health needs. And it's a partnership where we're working with their physician's office, our school resources, and then some of the child psychiatrists. That's a free program, and they've been piloting just supporting certain situations where we've had really where we've been really struggling to have a student meet their needs, and just getting resources, training. Sometimes that might even mean that they would go and receive an evaluation, kind of get fast tracked through Upstate if that need was needed. We also have just partnerships with our outside agencies, possibilities through Racker, and some of the other just Tompkins County Mental Health, lots of different opportunities in our pretty resource-rich Ithaca area. Yeah. Go ahead.
How we're supposed to read this chart? Maybe. I right now have low energy and low pleasantness. Would I be in the green quadrant?
You would.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you, I can send you the link if you want. There's a mood meter online. If you really click on like the grid, it'll give you a word, a vocabulary word, like I'm feeling low energy, low pleasantness. Might not be depressed, but it might be, it's really interesting to hear the kids say, I'm feeling a little like melancholy today. So it does help them put some words to how they're feeling, but starts with visuals.
So you mentioned priorities and like the possibilities program. Where is that on the budget slide? Is that in the tuition line or?
So the possibilities program is one of our what do we call them, coasters that we buy into through BOCES. So it would be in the BOCES budget. And this is the slide that I was talking about, Jill, around strengthening our service delivery models. So one of the big pieces around providing support, whether it be resource room, consultant teacher, or integrated co-teaching, is professional development for the teams and job embedded coaching. So in particular, what we want to see happening is that let's just say for integrated co-teaching, that there are 2 teachers in the classroom. The whole point of that is it reduces the student-teacher ratio in the classroom. So you've got a classroom of 20 kids, 2 teachers, now you've got 10 kids per adult. They're both certified teachers, and they're working together to plan and to instruct the students. So we want to see them using more of the models of co-teaching. So station teaching, parallel teaching. I was in a 2nd grade classroom, and there was a math lesson. They had heterogeneously broken up the students. There were a couple students that had IEPs that had math goals in each of the groups. One teacher took one group and they were using a certain method and some manipulatives. The other teacher took a different group. And they were able to both implement the lesson, and the students were grouped according, I would say, to need, but also to what they would respond to. So the lesson might have looked a little bit different in each of those groups. At the end, they came together, they did a debrief for the class. So we want to see more of that happening. Then one of the models I'll say is one teach, one assist, where one teacher is presenting to the whole class and one teacher is kind of going around checking in, maybe doing some reteaching to the side. We know that that's the least effective model, and that's often what our consultant teacher services look like. So we're trying to expand that, that we take a look at the actual lesson, what the objectives are, and are trying to have them think about other models that they could use that really use small group instruction or rotation. Yeah, go ahead.
So actually, the last part was when Jill was asking the questions, the data-driven intervention, we should have numbers behind the additional staffing and what are the desired results, correct?
Correct. So looking at that last bullet point, really what we want to see is what we're doing effective. And for students with disabilities, the best way to do that is that we have really strong, well-written goals, and we're doing progress monitoring so that we can see if your goal is to learn 100 sight words, like how's your progress towards that being monitored? And if it's not working, are we changing the intervention to a different way? So that is that, to get to that point, whether it be resource room service or integrated co-teaching, I've been doing a lot of professional development on goal writing. So they're observable and measurable goals, and then how to set up a system for progress monitoring that actually captures data that we can use.
I can say we've done enough instructional rounds on curriculum. We've been in enough classrooms. I think I can generalize and say I've seen 3 things. And all 3 I've seen without the benefit of knowing what's in the child's IEP, right? We don't know what you just said. We don't have access to that. But I've seen kids in classrooms so engaged, the aide never moves. And those are the most exciting to see. I'll say that's usually in the arts, actually, in the music and art class. They just never move because the teachers got it under control. I've seen kids on the other end of the spectrum where it looks like the aides' singular, spectacular success that day is keeping the child from self-harm. And I wonder, and I've asked our executives this, in those circumstances, my instinct is to say, is that child learning? But again, I don't have access to their issue. And then I've seen situations in between where excellent ESPs respond almost immediately, right? When the child is veering off, they take them into a one-on-one situation and relatively quickly they return them back to learning. So I've seen all 3, and I can, I guess that's all I can say. Without having access to what their issues are, I've seen the spectrum. Certainly cooler when the aide doesn't move.
Thank you.
Back to the data-driven intervention, and maybe Jen, you could, when the budget is over, maybe you could come back and share with us some numbers on how often goals and objectives are actually reported on in annual reviews. And this is a loaded request because I did, in my time here in the district, many thousands of annual reviews, literally many thousands of annual reviews. And I would be shocked if I saw 10 of them out of that total where the goals and objectives were addressed at the end of the year. Sometimes people would have wonderful objectives, sometimes they'd have terrible objectives, but almost never did somebody come back and say this student met their objectives in this way.
That sounds good, Jill. I'll bring some. I have to say it's a passion of mine. So having teachers reporting on the goal at the meeting is really important. But we are able to track that data out of IEP Direct, like how many were achieved versus not. So that's definitely something we can work on. And then the last thing I just wanted to quickly say was collaboration and planning time to do the models of co-teaching, to even provide really great consultant teacher services or resource room services. You need to know what's happening in the gen ed instruction. So we want to make sure that we are able to provide collaboration and planning time. One way to do that that we have piloted and we continue to expand each year is that 3-to-1 model for related service delivery, where there's 3 weeks of direct service, 1 week of indirect service. So students that may have gotten speech twice a week, that would be 8 sessions a month, are getting 6 sessions direct service and maybe 1 or 2 consultations. And what we're seeing is the teacher still holds that space, the speech and language provider, but would go into the classroom especially if they're receiving their services out of the classroom, and working with the classroom teacher or the ESP or the special education teacher to help generalize those services. And so we've played with how does that look across the week, across the month. And we've also been tracking, do kids get less time? Does it affect their goals? And we're finding it doesn't, because just due to life and generally kids that had 8 times a week were only getting 6 times a week due to snow days and absences and things like that anyways. Being able to write it in this way has also allowed some time for makeup sessions. So if a kid is absent, we can pull them on that 4th week. So we're finding that is slowly rolling out. We've had a couple schools pilot, then find success in a couple more schools last year. It got a little hindered during COVID because we couldn't group students and there was a lot of struggles with that. But this year we have a few more providers that are interested. Both OT now and speech have been trying it across multiple schools, including our middle schools and elementary schools. And that's all I have for that. And then the last slide is just hiring, training, and retaining talented staff, which it is not a surprise that we do have some uncertified teachers filling some of our positions. We've also had providers on leave, so recruitment efforts. One of the things we've been doing, I've been working with Ladira in trying to get our postings out early, connect with colleges, agencies. I've sent the posting to all the deans of regional colleges to say, hey, can you send this out? Going to talk with folks. Then once we have them here, to make sure that we're providing professional development. So some of that might be on site, where the educators for inclusion or myself are providing professional development, something like goal writing or job embedded PD. For instance, if a new aide comes on board, we want them to sit down, read the IEP, go through the behavior plan with our educator for inclusion on that first day, maybe spend a couple days shadowing and being able to get some training. What we're finding is they really are appreciating direct feedback on, like, that was really great when you stepped in and did X, or it was really great when you didn't step in and let the student try to figure it out on their own. So just providing more of that just-in-time support to staff. Any other questions?
Yeah, Jan, on this slide, so we heard a presentation yesterday. Well, I'm not on HR, but I snuck in HR, and they were discussing staffing issues. So we saw your presentation, early in your presentation, the number by which we want to increase staff. How's that squaring with the reality, what you're seeing out there in the hiring?
So we have done our first round of interviews and it's slow. I will say slow and steady. So we still have positions that are generally filled by general education teachers, or we have some that were ESPs that are in their special education programming, but they are generally finishing this year, so they'll be certified by next fall. There just are not as many teachers coming out of colleges, at the rate at which all of our districts are looking to hire. I don't think it's necessarily impossible. What we're finding is posting early, we'll do interviews every 2 weeks. And so the strategy behind that is that we're interviewing, they don't have to wait for an interview, that we'll offer a position and try to get to the candidates quicker than the other districts around us that are hiring. We did get 2 acceptances today, so I'm pretty excited about that, just for special education staff. I know, I'm really excited. I don't want to knock down wood because I haven't put in the paperwork yet. But I'm hoping that every time you guys meet for a voting meeting, you'll see a couple. I like that slow and steady wins the race. We are also looking for quality staff. We need good staff for our students that believe in what we believe in and are trained and able to actually provide the service we want them to provide. So that's a tenuous place to be when there are not, hundreds. When I got out, we were lucky to get an interview.
And we keep hearing about, not just, we have to always check the veracity, but we hear often about resignations and retirements. Is that something that we're facing with this particular type of teacher as well?
We've had a few resignations. I have followed up with all of our folks that have resigned to just do an exit interview or a personal interview, like why. Many times when I know somebody's resigning, they are moving away, might have a spouse that's moving. We've had some folks that have moved, not a lot. I think we had 2 or 3 last year that moved to a different district. And her children were starting school in the district and she wanted to be in the same district as her kids. Like each situation is kind of unique. It's not, there's not necessarily a single trend that we can say. It's just looking at that. I don't anticipate any retirements, but I think there's always surprises that happen. We've had a lot of people have babies and then they take leaves. So I'm always questioning, like, are they going to come back? Are they not? That's been hard.
Mary, you going to say something?
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I just wanted to take a moment and clarify that the budget tables, that those staffing patterns were over the last 3 years, for example. So school psychs at 12.0 FTE was for this school year 22-23. So moving to 23-24, we're looking to maintain the staffing and not increase. I want to be precise with that language, that there isn't a proposal to increase.
I hear what you're saying. I'll go back to that slide so that
We can
there's a
add,
visual.
we can add a column for 23-24
Or projected.
for projected based on the students in front of us now.
Yeah, so that was this year's number. I would just like to fill those positions. I'm not
And I
encouraging
don't
an
speak for
increase.
Jill. I think Jill's saying that's still too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that.
But so you're saying that so we did not have
We,
12.0 FT, because in an earlier meeting, I said, does that include the full-time FTE at Enfield? And someone said yes. So is there currently a full-time FTE?
so
at
that
Enfield?
number, what included are the full-time FTE. That person resigned in October of this year, and we had a posting up all year and we were not able to fill it.
I see.
We're able to contract with an agency to have someone come in just to do the testing that was needed to support those numbers. We've had quite an increase in the number of referrals, even though they might not be resulting in an IEP or a 504 plan, but the testing required to get to the table and determine whether or not that's happening, we still only have 60 days to do that. So we've been trying to just make sure that we're hitting our timeline. But yeah, so that number is including that 1.0 that we did not have this year for the majority of this year.
Yeah, was that, yikes, as I think about, the conversation we're having tonight and the need for more insight and information, I know one thing, I know our demographics have shifted significantly over the last amount of time. I don't even know how to count that time, but we know we have a lot of families now who are coming from the big five, right? From Buffalo, from Rochester, from Syracuse, from Utica, from Yonkers, from the city. 500,000 people left New York City last year. And they're coming with a different set of concerns, issues, and expectations, shall we say. And I'm curious about how much of our perceived need to increase our staff is in direct response to fulfilling their needs, right? Even if their needs are retrograde curriculum.
Yeah, usually school break time is obviously August coming into school. After the holiday break, December to January, we had 3 students move in unexpected, all with one-to-one aids and pretty significant needs. And it just kind of called on Monday morning and enrolled. So that changing landscape is hard. I'll also say that speech number, that 15.9, we've had 3 positions that are not filled right now. So I'm contracting those through agencies, just trying to meet the IEP sessions. Again, we're hoping there's a posting up that we'll be able to fill that. It's an area that's really hard to fill right now.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Could you go back one more slide, Jen? I want to ask one question about one number.
That one?
Nope, the next one with dollar figures.
This one?
Nope.
What? Backwards?
That one,
Forward?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the largest jump is that instructional hardware and software. I mean, it's just $4,000, but what accounts for that? What are we trying new? What are we getting?
That's a good question. So that is for a one-time purchase. We're looking at trying to digitize and move away from paper-based testing booklets and supports. So in that, so there's iPads that are associated with that cost. And we've also had some more software costs that are happening for specially designed reading programs, things like that, where kids get direct instruction and then have a portion of that on the computer. So, but the bulk of that is a one-time purchase so that we can provide some more hardware for students.
Done. Comment.
I just have one comment for this slide. In the future, can you put the actual numbers of like past years? Because that total at the bottom is the 1.4 is an actual number. It doesn't really equate to the actual contract services. There's some other actuals in there.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds good. I have more. Tried to give you 3 or 5 year perspective just because the font's hard to read, but if you want to see more historical perspective, we have that in the office. I'm happy to share that with you. I think it's actually linked. I did a just 6-page historical look that's linked into the front of this presentation. There's some other links out if you'll see the 504 slide has graphs and our new administrative regulations. Those are all hot links if they're blue on the presentation. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, you're not getting another question you asked. All right, so we have Q&A, how to manage communication flow and content.
And also if there were any lingering questions on the budget. So they sort of go hand in hand, right? So if there are questions about the budget itself, we're here, Emily and I have both of our computers and we can deep dive, and also we can go right to sort of the question and answer. So if there was a question that we both could answer tonight, and also we felt like it was really important to get on the question and answer area of the website, once the board adopts the budget, because we were talking about that the last time. That's why you're not seeing that right now. We can't answer questions about the budget because we don't have an adopted one yet by the board. So it's a both and hopefully Erin's still on too, because she's always my partner with communications and how to improve that. So we can sort of do that all together. Jill.
What was it just fled my mind. Never mind. Come back. I'm sure back.
I have a question, and I'm gonna ask it now because it piggybacks on the last conversation. So if I understand it, no matter how hard we work here in this district, try to meet the needs of all the kids with special needs, there's an overage, right? There's a level to which we actually cannot provide that service, and we send our babies to BOCES. Right, and BOCES helps us out with their alternative school and their CTE and their, I don't know if they call it special education school, but they have a school for kids with IEPs. On average, how many of our babies go there? What does that cost to us?
So we have, it depends on the program, right? And I think the BOCES presentation presented all the numbers for you. We buy slots. What I had to do, Eldred, is get you the table of the number of kids in each of those programs, right? Because you're right, they're varied. But throughout the budget, you will see BOCES lines, right, that are just very clearly delineated. So you will be able to go into regular ed and you can find a BOCES services line, and that's all the costs that would be for the BOCES services for that particular element. For special education under the 2250 area, right, there's a BOCES services line there. We spend $7.7 million budgeted, right? So remember, a lot of the BOCES unspent funds will come back to us in the next year as sort of a refund, right? So they essentially deliver the monies back to us that were not salary for unused programmatic choices or sort of like holding our spot, right, in a lot of these things. You'll see occupational ed is its own line. It's very clearly delineated for occupational ed, which is career and tech, right? 2.39 million, right here in the budget. So the answers to your questions are in the budget doc because BOCES is pieced out. But what I think we can do is maybe even in this budget document, perhaps we could say estimated number of students served or something for those particular lines, if that would be helpful.
Well, it's also in Jennifer's hot link on her report.
Jen, I didn't
District
look at it.
placements.
I saw that, but I couldn't.
Jen got that.
put it on the
Thank
screen.
you for having my.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, in my hot link, it has the BOCES placements. We have currently 63 students. It's actually 54 slots. Some kids go half days and they put two together and make a slot. The regional alternative school, you'll see these are just students with IEP numbers or 504 numbers. So I think the actual regional alternative school is 36 as of like last month.
I just think it's important for us to keep that in mind. We actually can't meet all the needs here at present, no matter what we try, right? So thank goodness we have partners that can assist us in serving the needs of our babies.
It was a procedural question, and that was a few weeks or months ago, as we were coming up on budget season and talking about the budget, someone mentioned that the principals would be coming to talk with us, and said the principals and the directors would be coming to express their needs. And
That never happened.
So the principals talk to us, so maybe that was, my miscommunication, but we meaning, Lily and Mary and myself and Gladira from HR and Sydney from my office, we actually have met with every single principal. The directors typically come here to this venue, and then the principals meet with us because, essentially, there's a predictability about the building level budgets, right? In terms of, the teachers that are returning we've been having a lot of dialogue about class sizes and just like the number of students and the number of teachers and the number of sections. That happens every single year. You'd be surprised, there's very little things that principals control in their own building budgets. They have salary codes, right, that and some contractual, and maybe if they have some PD ideas that they want to roll out in their building, but a lot of it is district level. And so it's really supporting them to roll those out. Some of the things that they do control are equipment. So a lot of equipment requests are by building. You'll see that lumped together here, but you'll see requests for things like, got a lot of requests for outdoor learning or lunch. So picnic tables to support when, things move outside. Sheds to store play equipment, movable goals or large things that you could utilize outside for more active learning and play. PE has its own budget. We don't bring that director in. That might be a new director that we want to bring in. But I apologize if I misspoke. The principals actually work with a large group, but that's where their budgets are vetted. Yeah, great question.
So with the communication piece, as we put it together to bring to the public, any questions, semi-recommendations on the budget piece? Because we strive to do this better and really communicate as effective as possible. I know.
Perhaps I can even just give you a little bit of like a benchmarking, right? So we took the Q&A often is a tool for education. A lot of the questions have been given at some time, right, in the past. And so a lot of those questions roll forward and we update them with the next year's budget information. And they'll go into different categories, right? So we talk about the revenue piece. So a lot of information about what do the taxes mean to me? What is the levy? Why are we taxing at the rate that we're taxing? How does that compare to the CPI? What are the trends over the course of time? We'll do like 10, 12-year look backs. We have charts in there for historic data, and that's a one-stop shop on that revenue piece. There's questions often about state aid, right? And like, are we getting our share? And what does that mean? We've pulled those in and out here and there. It got a little confusing with the federal aid. Those were pieces that we actually ramped up in just the past 2 years, and then we'll diminish those because federal aid is pretty much gone. Then other revenue pieces, right? How we might get things like the BOCES rebate, things like or refund, things like that. Rebate, I know Dave loves that when I say that too. Then we move on to the expenditure, and we go straight out with questions about, the biggest question is Dr. Brown's salary. And then we answer that question, and we answer the questions about the salary agreements within the bargained agreements, right? And like what everybody's going to expect from one year to the next based on negotiations. We outline elements in the budget like special education, technology, right? Things that we know. We educate about the propositions and the buses and those requests. So we try, as that rolls in, anytime anyone gets a question, we would love to encourage people to channel them all through Let's Talk, because number one, that gets a direct response to that person and it's tracked in terms of how quickly we respond. And then we also have a tracking tool through communications department to be able to put that response right on the website, because they actually have a window into that system as well. So we would love that first and foremost, if there's questions. But then as the board gets questions, right, those can get pushed to me, and then I try to respond to you to respond out, but then I also put that on the FAQ. We don't reveal the sources. We don't say, you know, taxpayer Amanda V wants to know, right? Like, we don't do any of that. So it's perfectly safe. And we usually ask it in a manner that we would assume most people would want to know.
All right. I'm going to recommend we adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate your time.